I was thinking about how I wanted to approach this season, and I've decided that what I think is going to be really useful is instead of me just answering questions, I want to ask you questions. I want to ask you some big, tough, meaty, universal question and give you a chance to go into your life and find out for yourself, how am I answering this? And what kind of impact is that having on my life? Because really that's what matters, right? Not some general stuff, but what am I doing and how is it impacting my life? And then we can talk about um, our answers, how we're answering this, and what we might do to change the way we're answering it if we find that doing so is going to help us more closely connect with who we want to be and how we want to be in our lives. So before I ask the first question, though, I do want to give some credit to three people who've had a big impact on my work and my life, and therefore this podcast. And it's important that you know who these people are because none of my work comes out of thin air. None of what I talk about on this is my original ideas. It comes from decades of research on something called ACT, which is acceptance and commitment therapy, or I call it training because I use it a lot in coaching. But Dr. Stephen Hayes is one of the founders of this approach. It's not just an approach for therapists and coaches, it's really a completely different way of viewing and relating to our own human experience. Very different from what you will have learned probably as a kid growing up, very different from what the media and self help books out there suggest to you. And by the end of today's episode, you're going to have a really good idea as to why. The second person is Dr. Russ Harris, whose program I went through when I decided to bring ACT into my work. And the third person is my dad, Dr. James Pontius, who was the very first person to introduce me to this whole radical shift in the way we look at our own human experience and the way that we relate to it. He introduced it to me about 12 years ago. He saw Dr. Stephen Hayes at a lecture, and it just completely shifted his own work in psychology. So he's been a big mentor to me. My dad has. Okay. The first question I want to ask that I want to focus today around, it's the most basic fundamental question that there is. And it's also the question that Dr. Stephen Hayes first asked. The question is this: what do you do about difficult thoughts and feelings? If you're feeling really stressed or you're angry or you're ashamed, sad, if somebody's really trying your patience, or maybe you're at a crossroads in your life, or you're about to do something that completely terrifies you, what do you do when there's turbulence inside your own skin? Dr. Stephen Hayes wanted to know, what do people do about difficult thoughts and feelings? So he and a team of people went all around the world and they interviewed people of completely different cultures and races and backgrounds and religions, complete diversity. And they asked these people, and I want to ask you to do the same thing right now. Think about some kind of psychological struggle, whether it's a thought or a feeling, an urge, a memory. Maybe it's that belief or that judgment you carry about yourself, but just some kind of struggle that you know about that when it shows up and it's at its strongest, you just feel and maybe you act at your very worst. And he asked them to physicalize so that the researchers could understand this is what it feels like to be me when this happens. And so they used their bodies, they put their bodies into some kind of physical posture that would resemble what it was like so they could get it. And it didn't matter who it was, where the person was from, how much education they had. Everybody chose closed body postures that in some way or another very closely resembled the way I looked that day lying on the kitchen floor. Whether it was eyes closed, arms crossed, shoulders hunched, bodies caved, as if we are all just trying to protect ourselves from this thing that feels like it's attacking us, that we're just trying to hide and protect ourselves from being attacked by this thing, except for this thing is happening, and it's happening inside our own skin. And it turns out that this closed body posture that everybody chose is the same mental posture that we all assume, no matter who we are, this is what human beings do about difficult thoughts and feelings. We protect ourselves. We try to fight or to hide, but we do something to make it disappear. Except when Dr. Hayes asks, how old is that? How long has that struggle been around? And I want you to think about that for yourself for a second. Whatever that was, that thought or that feeling, whatever that was that really gets you down, how old is it? Is it new? Because in most cases, it's not new. In fact, in a lot of cases, it's so old, it goes so far back that we can't even pinpoint exactly where it first began. And isn't that weird? I mean, if you think about it, normally if you're being attacked by a threat and you fight or you hide and you protect yourself, it works. The threat disappears. So why are these struggles so old? It doesn't seem to make sense. It doesn't seem to work in the same way. And so this is what Dr. Hayes and his team had to ask. How is that possible? And here's what they came up with. Whereas you can control threats outside of your skin, you cannot control your inner turbulence. Those private events, those thoughts, feelings, urges, memories, sensations in your body, they are not in your control, not fully. More than that, when we try to, we do more damage to our lives. If you're feeling really stressed out, for example, and let's say you go and you smoke a cigarette or you push through that stress, those are ways of fighting the stress, and it's going to make it feel like it disappears for a while. But what's the cost? The cost is peace to your body and to your mind. And flip it around. Let's say you're feeling stressed and you try and hide and protect yourself against that stress by staying in bed or avoiding your work. It's going to make the stress disappear for a moment. But the cost is productivity. And how about that urge that you're trying to fight? If you've ever tried to go on a diet, change your eating habits, or maybe you've struggled with drugs or alcohol, or maybe you just try to change any kind of habit, what happens? That urge shows up and it's painful. And you try to fight it, but you can only fight it for so long until you just exhaust yourself. And so what do? You eat the food, you take the drug, you drink the alcohol, you do the thing. Why? Because it makes that painful urge disappear. But what's the cost? The cost is peace to your body and productivity toward your goals to change. Do you get it? I mean, like this rule, it applies to everything. And it drives people crazy because we all just want to know, how do I make it disappear? How do I get rid of this? And we read self-help books, we take courses, we Google it, we do all sorts of things. How do I get rid of my anxiety? How to conquer your fears? How to reduce stress? And what I'm saying is, in our very attempts to solve this problem, the way we might solve getting rid of gum off the bottom of our shoe, when we treat these inner problems the same way, we do it, and we do it at the cost of our own peace or productivity or both. We try to fight or to hide from that inner turbulence as if it were some kind of external threat we could possibly defeat. I just lost a really good friend to suicide 8 months ago. Suicide It's the ultimate solution that the mind comes up with for making that pain inside your skin disappear. So you have to ask yourself, what are you going to believe? Are you going to believe your mind and all of its logical, rational, great creative ideas that it comes up with that says, if I do this, it will get rid of it and I'll feel better? And all of those books and those advertisements that suggest that there is some kind of permanent solution out there. We can make that work if we just try harder. Or are you going to believe your own experience? Which suggests that the things that we struggle with the most are really old, and they tend to come back, and they tend to last despite our efforts to get rid of them. Your experience, which shows that when you drive down that road and you do things with the sole objective of trying to defeat it, you are driving in the opposite direction of peace and productivity in your life. Am I saying there's nothing to be done? No. Am I saying you should just get over it? Move on? No. What I'm saying is, this is the problem that your mind doesn't know how to solve. It just doesn't know. But there are 3 reasons that the mind keeps us in this trap. There are 3 reasons that we keep doing this, even though it doesn't fundamentally work. We feel compelled to believe the mind when it says there is a solution. And the first reason is evolution. Humans have evolved to control things, and it works really well with everything else. There's a blizzard outside, there's life-threatening temperatures. What do? You go inside, you turn on your heat, you protect yourself, you hide from the cold. You have a problem and you don't know how to fix it. How do you fix it? You ask Google, you YouTube it, you figure it out. It's problem solving, right? So hiding and fighting and problem solving are great strategies that have helped us in every other area of life. The second reason we do it is because we're programmed that way. From a very young age, programming, it's the messages you receive as a child growing up that imply that you should be able to control your thoughts and your feelings. So if I say to you, don't cry over, you'll say, spilled milk. And if I say, don't cry or I'll give you something to, you'll say, cry about. And if I say, just get over, you'll finish the sentence with it. And if I say, don't think about, you'll say it. You see, these are messages we get that imply that we can control how we think and we feel. But what's really going on here? When you're a kid and you're receiving these messages from adults, what's really happening is the adult is saying, I don't like how I feel when you feel how you feel. Stop feeling how you feel so I don't have to feel how I feel. And you have to wonder, right? If people could really do that, why didn't the adults stop feeling the way they were feeling first, instead of asking a child to do what the adult couldn't even do? But as a kid, we look up to these adults and we think that they know something until we grow up and we look around and we see adults. We're a frickin' mess, right? We're using work and technology and drugs and fights, and we're doing all sorts of things so that we just can expel what we're thinking, expel what we're feeling, so we don't have to acknowledge and deal with what we're thinking and feeling. The third reason is because of short-term reinforcement. Because it works on some primitive level in the short term. It gets our needs met in that moment. Even though fundamentally it doesn't work forever. It's not a permanent solution. It keeps coming back, and then we have to keep doing that same activity again to make it go away, and it becomes that vicious cycle. But it pays off on a primitive level, and so it hooks us. It hooks us, and we just keep doing it. So in the introduction, I talk about how we're not just humans, but we're human beings. this kind of practical problem solving, tangible, logical way of dealing with the world. This is the human part. The mind is the tool that we use to function every day on that level, and we need it. It's important, of course. It works in every other area of life. But we have to explore the level of being. The being part. It's just a wiser part of yourself. It's the part of you that can watch your mind when it assumes that closed mental posture and it tries to make that stuff disappear. It's the part of you that can watch it with the perspective and the distance. It can help you open up and respond in a wiser, more loving, self-compassionate way. When your mind says, I need to shift away from this, I need to hide from this, this is the part of yourself that can help you turn toward it and step back and to recognize, to have that perspective, that distance, to go, oh, here's me, and that's my mind reacting. To stop and to choose, what do I really want to do? Words like vulnerability, openness, willingness, presence, self-compassion, these are words that are like a foreign language to the practical mind. It just doesn't get it. But the more savvy our minds become at controlling things, the more fundamental it becomes that we speak this language and we have that anchor, a connection to being. So here's my suggestion to you for the week. Go into your life and find out, what do I do about difficult thoughts and feelings? You'll find that there is an impulse to want to control them, to hide or to avoid them or to fight them, but really just a desire to make them disappear. And notice all the ways your mind tries to tempt you down that path. Can you stand with yourself and be kind to the human part of you when it's at its most vulnerable, when it just wants to make it disappear? Can you have the perspective to be there for yourself as the loving, wise, compassionate one? I hope this has been useful for you and that you'll join me again next week.